Here is indeed the Composer Pro platform, and it has two distinct parts. There's the platform part, which is this which is in this web browser window that you're seeing. It's a sort of online platform. You make an account and you sign in, and this is basically the view that we drop you into. I've made a little welcoming slide as an app here on the UI canvas. And then the other part is over here on the right, and it's the preview app. So what you're seeing on this screen is on my Android phone. It's an app installed there, and basically what it does, it gives me a live preview of all of this stuff. So let's say I delete this component and save. Then we can instantly see that it's reflected there. So these are the basic parts. And then going forward with Composer, we have a few things going on here. So the middle part here is the UI canvas, where you drag in components and kind of compose the layouts of your applications and so on. And on the left here, you have the component library, where you can like drag different elements and components onto the canvas. And there's quite a few of them to begin with in the standard library, but then there's also a component marketplace, and you can install more. And it's also possible to make your own components in Composer Pro. Other than that, we have some properties for each of the components. So here you can see a headline component. It has a content property, and I've set it to say, welcome to AppGyver Live here. And there's plenty of other properties, and there's also some styling options. Like, for example, if we look at this one, this paragraph, we can see that I've made some bolding into the font, and you can control the typography and laying out all of these things here. What is more is that we also have the Composer Pro apps are made up of pages. So this is a page, and if I click here, it opens the pages section, and you can add new pages here to the application. I won't add a new page now since we'll be only needing this one, but you can see a preview of the page, and you can make as many pages in the applications as you like. And then there's also something called the global canvas, which doesn't have a user interface, but is useful when you want to do certain types of logic on the whole application, like globally. Okay, and then one more thing that's good to know is that all of the items, maybe it makes more sense if I show you a button component. So we dragged from the component library a button component here. And here in the bottom bar, I can click this, and it opens up a logic canvas for the button. So for example, if we go here and we drag in an alert node, and then we connect this up, and then we type in something like this to the alert node, and then we save. The button shows up, and when I press it, you get the alert. So that's kind of the basics of how you do logic in Composer Pro. Some of the other things we'll be touching on pretty much everything during the actual app that I'm going to build. Some of the other sections that exist here are themes, navigation, data, authentication. Well, that's one that we won't be having time to go in today. And then, of course, after you've created your app, you can head into the launch section, and you can actually, well, here, first of all, it gives you the links to all the preview apps that I'm using, the Android preview app here on the right, and you can also preview web apps here. And finally, when you're done with all of your applications, then there's also the build service, which also will be kind of outside the scope of today, since we we will first have to build an app, but indeed then you can get into the distribution. But just to show you that kind of all the tools are here for doing almost any kind of thing that you might want to. So what are we going to build today? We're going to build today a little app that scans barcodes of food items and then tells us information about them. And something that we're going to use here, the next, wait a minute, I need to, sorry about that. I'm having a little issue with the, there we go. Yeah, sorry, there was an errant Zoom bar blocking my access to the browser. No worries there. So what are we going to be using to get some data about the food items is this API called Open Food Facts. So it's kind of this community food community project that hosts lots of data about food products. And I have here an example of an API call. Now, if you have never seen an API call, then you're like, oh no, what is happening? But basically, all that's happening here is that we have a URL with openfoodfacts.org. Then it tells us in the next part that it's an API. Then it tells us which version of the API it is. And then we're getting a product. And in case you don't know anything about barcodes basically on food items or any item, they basically encode these number series. So anytime you see a barcode, actually the number is usually printed below the barcode as well. So that's how barcodes work. And the way this API works is that you ask it a barcode, which is this part, this number part here, and then it gives you back some data. So here I have a food product that I picked up the barcode for earlier, and you can find it. And in the browser, it doesn't look like much since we're looking at a bunch of JSON data in raw format. So this is not very usable to us, but it will make us very happy once we get the app up and running. So just to kind of put together once more what I said there is that we're going to build an app that's going to scan a barcode of a food product. Then we're going to take that barcode and ask that Open Food Facts API a bunch of data about the food product, and then we're going to show it in the app. So you can then with the app go and scan the different barcodes and get some info about the products. So I hope that will be a fun demo for us to work with. Okay, so well, I guess now shortly, if in the chat there's any like questions about the intro or what we're about to do.
For now, Kimmo just asked, how can you make multilingual apps?
Well, that's a kind of a different story, but you can, but it's a bit of a longer conversation than we have time for here for.
Yeah, if you guys have general questions about the platform, feel free to ask. We'll try to, at the end of this particular presentation, try to get to.
Yeah, and yeah, please ask all the questions because we'll be making use of them. And you can also, after the session, we'll give you some Twitter links and so on, and you can send us all the questions ever. But if everyone's kind of like satisfied with this introduction, then I'll just go ahead and start building this example. Okay, so I'll start by basically deleting this intro here, all the elements. So we start with a slightly blanker slate. So here we have the headline components. Then I had some dividers just to make the layout work a bit better, but we're getting rid of them all now. And oh yeah, here at the bottom here, there's also a page tree, so you can see how the layout is put together. So here's a row component that includes these elements, and then there's a button, and you can kind of like manage more easily sometimes with complex layouts when you use the tree view. But again, we're going to get rid of all of these things, and then we're going to save. that should give us a very, very, very blank slate to start with. Excellent. Okay, so to make this barcode scanning app, well, we need to start with the basics, like in terms of what do we need in the UI. I told you we were going to be scanning some barcodes, and then we wanted to display some info about them. So maybe the first thing that we should start with is getting a button that can open the scanning function, which is performed with the device camera. So we'll drag here a button, and then we'll make the button label a bit more descriptive. So scan barcode. And I'll be hitting the save a lot so we can see the things updating. Okay, so this button, by the way, is already like we can click it, but nothing happens. And before we get into the what happens part, then the other part was that we wanted to show some info about the product that we scanned. And at this point, I just want to lay it out here so that we have it in the layout. So I'm just gonna put like we don't know yet actually like what sort of data we'll be getting and how it's going to look, but I'll just put a couple of paragraphs here to represent that eventually we'll have some data about the product here. So that's just some setup so that we remember we'll be replacing these with the product information a bit later. Okay, so I just very quickly showed you about the logic canvas. And now the first question is like, how do we get forward with this button and the logic for it? Well, we select the button and then we go here in the bottom, and here it says add logic to button 1. So we'll open that up. And in here, we see that on the canvas by default, there's a single event node, which is called component tap. And what this means is that this is an event when that happens whenever the button is tapped or clicked. And then here you can see that there's this little endpoint for this particular node, so we can connect further stuff. And in the intro, I showed you how we connected an alert box there, and then it gave us the like little alert dialog whenever we click the button. So, but now we're gonna look into the logic library, and we need something bit different. There's a couple of nodes on the device section. We could take a photo, and we can also get a GPS location. And there's quite a few different things here, but also handily, we have a kind of out-of-the-box scan QR or barcode functionality. So we just simply go here on the left, and then we drag it onto the canvas. And now we can go ahead and connect this to the component tap event. So now when the button is tapped, it goes into this scan QR or barcode node. And here it actually gives us a few options for the node. So if I click on the event, you can see that the properties here on the properties panel change. And if I click on the scan QR barcode node, then the properties are for that particular node. And you can also, from the read more section, you can find out a bit more how the flow function node actually works. So this one works so that it opens the camera to scan a QR or barcode, and then depending on what the user does, so there's a couple of things that can happen. The user can scan a code, in which case we get the code back, or then the user might close the camera without scanning code, in which case we go to the second output of the node. And if there's some sort of error, usually from the device, or the camera crashes or something happens, something weird happens in the device, then the error is sent to the third output. And the outputs we can see here on the node. There's 3 outputs. So the top one will contain the barcode if a barcode was scanned, and the middle one will be the canceling operation, and then finally the third one will be the error case, which shouldn't really happen, but can happen. Okay, so if I save now, we can already use this. So if I open the camera here, Oh, sorry, fumble a little bit. So I've assembled some products here on my table, and now we can see that I have this can of tomatoes. Hello, Italy. And if I just show it the barcode, it exits the camera because it read the barcode, and now it's done with it. But of course, okay, so now we can scan barcodes, but nothing happened yet, and that's of course because we're not doing anything with our barcode. So once again, just to demonstrate how all of this works, we can put an alert dialog here. Just move it over there. And now to get the barcode output from this node to the alert node, we'll use something that is used quite a lot in Composer almost everywhere, which is bindings. So you last time we saw this, I just typed in something in the dialog title, but that's of course not all we can do. So here's this ABC icon, and it says when I hover there, currently bound to static text, which means that it's bound to whatever is typed here. Now, this binding icon means that this can be bound to quite a number of other things. And if I click it, it opens up the binding editor. And there's a few categories of things we can now bind this alert dialog to. One is data and variables. One is a formula, which we'll be seeing at the end of this presentation. There's component properties, but then this one is for us the most interesting right now, output value of another node. So if we go navigate in here, we can actually see that it knows about the nodes on this particular logic canvas. So the receive event node refers to the component tap event, and then the scan QR barcode node refers to the node that we put there. So if we select this one, we can select the node output. There might be multiple ones, but in this case, there is only one. So what the node will return us is the QR or barcode content as text, as it says there. And we click on that, and then it gives us an opportunity to save. So now the dialog title in this logic flow is bound to the output of this thing. So it's a slightly different thing. So these connections here, they control how the flow operates. So these connections mean that once the component is tapped, then we scan a QR or barcode, and then this being in the top output means that if a barcode was scanned, then we go into the alert dialog. But these values are kind of separate from that. So this binding is what will make this next part work. So I'll save again, and now I'll scan again the tomatoes. It's sometimes yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we got the barcode of the tomato can, which is the series of numbers here. Okay, so we're quite well along to our application of scanning barcodes and making this whole thing work. The next thing that we should do is we should, I'm gonna delete the alert since this is, I'll actually leave it there but we'll be doing something else. This is not really necessary for the whole thing. Okay, so we already managed to tackle the part about this application where we're scanning the barcodes and then we're getting the barcode as a number. So that's great. Now the next part was this API. So if we again look at the URL, please don't look at the mess of the JSON data. That's not really going to be helpful to us at all. But if you look at this URL, the barcode is here. So it makes sense that for us to be able to use this API with our app, we should be able to make this kind of HTTP request, but to be able to put the barcode that we have scanned in here. And now we're going to see that that's exactly what we're going to be able to do. I just copied this URL on my clipboard. What we're going to be able to do using the data configurator in Composer Pro. So let me close that one just for a quick bit, and we'll use the data configurator here. And right now it's empty because we haven't added any data resources. So what are data resources? Data resources in Composer are a way of connecting to different data sources and things like that. And there's quite a few different types that we have available. There's some, if you look at some of the tutorials on our documentation and so on, or the to-do application tutorial there, you will see some use of the client-side storage and the AppGyver cloud storage, which are kind of these internal storage types. But then, and then we also have a kind of marketplace search, which enables you to look for integrations on the marketplace. But in our case, where we just have this API like open food facts and it's just there, and this kind of the usual case of the way it is that there's just an API and you would want to find some way to connect it, then we have this thing called REST API direct integration. And this will pretty much work for most APIs that return data in the JSON data format, which should be pretty much like almost any kind of API at this point. And the way we start working here is that we add a new data resource that is of the type of the REST API direct integration. And that, when we click the add, it takes us to this view where we configure the resource. So we have a few things we need to enter for the resource. First of all, we need to enter a resource ID. That should be like a unique name just for the resource, but unique within the app. So here we can enter something like food facts. And then we could enter a short description about like what this resource is about. So data from food facts API. It displays this description in a few places, so it's sometimes helpful to enter this. And then we have the first hard question of the configuration, which is the resource URL. And I'm just gonna copy the API URL here and then explain how this works. So this says here, the info box says that this is the base URI of the API resource that it refers to. And the base URI is a kind of sort of not always clear concept. Here I would break up this API URL so that obviously world.openfacts.org is part of the base URL, and then also the part where it tells you it's an API and where it tells you it's the version 0 of the API. But then I would say that from the product onwards, it's kind of not part of the base URL, because this might be changing to something else. So I'll take that out. I'll copy that to the clipboard. So this should be enough for the base configuration. So now we are ready to sort of like add more stuff after this URL. And I'll just go ahead and save at this point. And now on the left, we have these methods. And these, again, if you're familiar with REST APIs, then you will recognize this as HTTP methods and REST API methods. What these do, they are for sending different types of requests to the API in question. So typically with REST APIs, these are kind of the basic archetypes of requests that you can send. You can send a GET collection request, which uses the GET protocol or the GET method. And you can send a GET record, which is a single record, which also uses the GET method. You can send a create record, which uses the POST method, which is a HTTP method. And then you can send an update and delete record. Now, if we think about in our case, like what would be a good representation for what we're trying to do, we are sort of trying to get the data for a single food product. So I think in this case, and we can tell that it's a GET request. This gets a bit technical and I won't get like too deeply into how HTTP actually works, but basically, since we're able to see this in the browser, like this is the browser makes a GET request. The POST request is something that's used with, for example, forms, and we can also say send POST request in some other ways. But when you just visit a URL in the browser, it's a GET request. So to replicate this and to be able to do a similar request, we will use the GET type method get record, since we're getting the data for a single kind of food item. The get collection would make sense if we would be getting like a huge list of things or something like that. But for now, we'll just use the get record method. Okay, and here we have some more configuration. Now it's actually displaying the relative path that we put as the resource relative path. And the reason why we put in a relative path is that you don't have to repeat it all over these methods as you're doing them. And here we could now enter the rest of the URL, which is of course product and then the barcode. Now, of course, we want to make it so that we can control this number that's being sent to the API depending on which barcode we have scanned. And for that, we actually have a very handy thing here, which is called the URL placeholder. And by default for the get record thing, we have some of these conveniences in the platform. So by default, the get record method has a URL placeholder convert called ID. Now we'll take this one and we'll just change it a little bit to make the label say barcode, and also let's make the key barcode. And this will enable us to just like reason a bit better about like what is happening there. There are some other options like the value type text is fine with us. No, it's not static. We want it to be dynamic. One thing that we want to change about this is possibly making it not optional, since we really do need a barcode every time we send these requests. But with that, we have configured the placeholder. And now to use the placeholder, so remember we wanted to replace this barcode here to be able to send our barcode to the server in this case. We'll just take this part, which is the barcode, and then in curly brackets, we can enter the name of a URL placeholder. So now the URL placeholder replaces this bit with whatever we give it. And we're going to give it the barcode in just a moment. But now I'll actually see if I can, yes, we can go here. So this is all the configuration we need. We have the relative path, we're configuring the get record method, and now we've given it the URL and changed it so that we are replacing the barcode bit of the URL with the URL placeholder. So after this, we head into the test tab, and now it already knows about, since we have the placeholder configured, it knows that there should be a barcode here. And we're just going to bind it for the test tab. We're going to bind it static text, and then we can go back here into the URL, which we have this barcode that I've gotten beforehand. So we see that this request is in fact working and it gives us data. So we want the same thing to happen in here. So the test is, we'll put the barcode here. We could also use the one that we got from the tomato can earlier. That would work just as well. And then now we're ready to sort of push the run test button, which will take all the configuration, and then it will attempt to send a request to the API, and then we see the response on the right. So I'll press that. Yeah. And now we're getting basically the same request done in Composer Pro as we did in the browser. So now it's putting together the whole request, but we're able to control which barcode we're asking from it. And already you can see that now the data is slightly more useful to us, since Composer knows, unlike web browsers, it knows about JSON, and it can show us some more interesting data. Like, yes, this is a barcode for a licorice product that we'll be scanning soon, actually. And after we have done the test, there's one more really important and really helpful step that we can do, which we can find here below the test button. After we have a successful test and we get some data back, we can press the set schema from response. So if you don't know what is a schema, it refers to the structure and the naming of this data. So this is all schema. It's schema that this data has this key called status_verbose, and then it has like a value for it. The value is not part of the schema, but kind of this general structure of the data. I'll just go ahead and press it, and you'll be able to see what I mean. Yeah, and now we've set the schema from response. So it took the structure of the data from the response from the API. And in the case of Food Facts API, there's quite a few things on the thing that we get back. In fact, the product data has 191 properties, and we can see all of them here. So it has lots of different information about the scanned food item, and we can be making use of all of these if we want, but we'll pick a few as an example. And with that, we're actually done with configuring the resource. So the important bits here is that basically what we did was we took the original API request that we just had in the browser, and we can see that this works. So we want to do this in Composer, and then we parameterized all of it and configured it in this data panel to make it into a data resource and to be able to send different barcodes through it easily. So there, I'm going to save, and then we can get back to the button logic here. So the last time we were here, we were able to scan barcodes, and then there was an alert that showed the number for the scanned barcode, and that was working fine. Now, obviously, the next bit, I'll just rearrange it here. We have to do some compromises for space, unfortunately, on this screen, but it will be fine. So the next bit is, how do we use the data resource in our logic that we just specified in the data configurator? Well, that's also pretty easy. So we can go again here in the flow function library, and we can find this section with data. And it has very familiar names. It has these functions called get record collection, create record, and so on. And the method that we defined was a get record method. So we'll drag that onto the canvas. And already we can see that it actually knows about the data resource that we configured. So it's already there, Food Facts resource. If we would have more than one resource, then you could select between them. But since we only have this one, it's just there. And we should connect this to the scan QR barcode. So again, the top output is where we're gonna be exiting out of when the barcode is scanned. And at this point, I'll get rid of the alert, since we won't be needing that anymore, since we're passing the barcode now to the get record function. And again, just like with the alert dialog, now the barcode here means the URL placeholder that we configured. And since we made it compulsory and dynamic for this data resource, it also is displayed now here for the get record function. So just like with the alert, we open up the binding editor, and then we find the category output value of another node. And then we already know what we want. We want the output of the scan QR barcode node, and then we save from there. So now, all in all, what's happening in our logic is that we're tapping the button, we're scanning the code, and then we're sending it to the data resource using the code. And again, we can see multiple outputs. In the case of the get record, the topmost output, I can just open the description here. So this will make HTTP call with the resource, and then it will return us some data. And if it successfully gets some data, meaning that the internet is on and it can find the resource and connect the API, then we'll get the data out of the topmost output. And if there's some sort of problem with the connection or something like that, then we'll get it out of the bottom output. So then we need some way to get the data into the paragraphs here. So while we're able to scan the barcodes and while we're getting the data, like if I would run this now, it would get the data, but again, we're not doing anything with the data. And for that, we actually want to create a variable to store the data to temporarily. So variables are something that's very useful for storing data while the app is running so that you can use it in different places and display it and so on. And for that, again, I'll close down the logic tab, and then we'll go here on the top of the UI canvas where it says there's the selector between the view and variables. And when I click here, it opens up the variable configurator, and there's a few types of variables for different needs in Composer. So app variables are something that's kind of like a global variable in the app, so it's available everywhere and it's kind of meant for things that are like common to all the entire application. And then page variables are page specific. So right now we are on this page just called empty page. So we could create page specific variables. There's something called page parameters, which are used to sort of like pass data to pages when you're opening them. And then we have data variables and translation variables. Data variables, we could use page variables to store the returned data from the API too. Now, the downside of that is that the page variable wouldn't know about the schema of the data resource. And that's why we're going to be using a data variables to store it too, because then we'll see in a really neat way we can work with the entire data structure of the thing. So we're going to be creating a data variable to be able to access the data from the data resource and the API. So data variables are always created from a data resource. So if I hadn't created the data resource, this would display that there's nothing to do. So we can't add the data variables before we have a data resource. So these are kind of tied together. And I click on add data variable, and then it gives us a list of data resources. And in this case, the list is only our sole singular data resource, food facts. And I can just press there and it adds a new variable. I guess since this is just a single food fact, we'll just call it like a food fact variable. And the type for this is definitely single data record. And again, we would be able to pass the barcode here if we had a slightly different type of logic. But since we're doing it in the button logic, we're going to be using this data variable simply to store the data in the actual logic flow. And for this, it's important to understand that the data variables also have a little bit of default logic to them. So if I select this data variable and then I open up the logic canvas, we get the default logic here. The default logic, what it does is it attempts to get a record from the resource, then it sets the value to the data variable, and then with a delay, it does that periodically in, by the default case, every 5 seconds, so 5,000 milliseconds. And this can be really useful if you're working with some type of like database where you're constantly updating things and you want to get like records back. And the update is not kind of like, it's not tied to some specific logic. But in our case, our logic is kind of like tied to scanning the barcode. So we only ever get new data as we scan a new barcode. So in our case, we should get rid of this default logic here, since it's only it's not going to do anything that helps us. So we can delete that, and And it's good to be aware that it's there. In a lot of cases, it's helpful, and also that there is really there's very little magic here, like things like automatically fetching data from data resources, like they are in here, and you can configure them. Now, if you would edit some of the logic, it's really easy to simply reset the data variable logic to its original state. Or you could just create a new data variable and delete the existing one. So it's not a very big deal. So again, what we did here is we created the data variable from the data resource that we specified, and we wanted it to be the single data record type. And because we don't need the auto fetching thing, because our logic in this example is tied to scanning the barcode, then getting the data from the API, and then doing something with the returned data from the API. We don't need the default kind of auto fetching logic. So I went ahead and removed that. And with that, we've configured a data variable. And again, I'll press save. And then next, we'll take the data from the API, and then we'll put it into the data variable. I'll minimize that. Okay, so back to the main UI view. Again, let's go to the buttons logic thing. So where we left off was scanning the barcode and then querying with the barcode. As you can see here, now this is bound to the barcode output from the scan QR node, and then we're getting a record, and we're getting the data back in the top output. So, and to put it into the data variable or any variable, there's a couple of flow functions here that can help us. So there's set app variable, set page variable, and set data variable. And since we made data variable, we want the set data variable. And to make the logic go forward, I'm going to connect these together as well. And here, again, we see with the data variable, it says the data variable name, which we named food fact, and then the data to be set to the variable. So we could specify lots of different things here, or even use static values or any kind of data from anywhere in the app. But we know what we want. What we want comes from the get record node. So again, we're going to use this binding icon to open up the binding editor, and then we're going into the output value of another node category. You might feel that these things repeat themselves, but it's kind of this workflow that is kind of very convenient once you get the hang of it. So we want the get record, and then we actually want the whole record, since we don't know which properties we want yet. So we want to store the whole record into the node. Okay, seems that there we go. Okay, so now we save. And then let's save there. And once again, now we have all the logic. We're going to be done with the logic part of this button. So now the entire logic is that when the user taps the button, we open up the camera to scan the barcode. Then we use the barcode to use the data resource to get a record from the data from the API, and then the data we're setting to a data variable. That all works now. Unfortunately, this doesn't really alter our demo that much, since still the data is in the data variable, but not to worry, we're soon going to be able to use it. So in the very beginning of this demo, I put these two paragraphs here. So that we would eventually put some info there. So, and we already saw how the scanning works, and we can get the barcode. So now it would be really nice to, for example, get the product name when we're scanning the can of tomatoes. It would be nice if we could get the app to show the product name fetched from the API based on the barcode. And we're going to do exactly that. So here's the paragraph component again. And by now, I think we're quite familiar with the content property binding icon, and here it says it's currently bound to static text, and we want to change that so that it uses the data that we have fetched. So let's open up the binding editor, and now we can navigate into the data and variables section, and then we can choose here data variable, and since we only have one data variable, it's going to give us this view. And now we can actually select a field from the variable. Now here, some of you might be like, well, like, hang on, this is not like we are in the editor, the app is not running, so how come it knows about all the data that is coming from the API? Well, that's based on the schema that we saved when we tested the resource. So that's when we fetched all these fields, and this is one of the like really nice features in Composer Pro, where it's able to save you these things, and then you don't have to go and read through the API docs or anything to figure out which field was it called, especially since, you know, this is not a very complicated API, but it has quite a few fields. So now we are already able to do kind of cool things with this. So we wanted the product name. So I happen to know where the product name is in this API, so it's getting a bit stuck on the bar. So now how does the alphabet work? There we go. Product name. Yeah, so, and that's a text type property. And this is another thing that's good to know about, is that in Composer, all of these properties and things have types. So here it says, for example, in the paragraph content, we're allowed to put in text or a number type data. So the product name is a text type. It's kind of a text string, so it's perfectly fine to put it in there. And then, apologies for a little slow down in the UI. It's a bit, all of this streaming stuff is kind of, and there we go. It gives us a preview value. So this is the name of the licorice product that I was using in the example that this original API data is for. And it knows to show this in the preview because we saved the schema and the data that came from the API. So this is not running any queries or anything like that. So this is just here to help us develop the application in a more timely and easier fashion. So we are happy with that, and we can do that. By the way, if you don't know what licorice product we're talking about, we can scan that too in a bit. So now we are actually ready to test this again, scanning the barcode. So I'll go ahead and open the camera, and then we'll take the tomato can. Yes, and there we go. Now it fetched from the API the name of the product, and I would agree with it that yes, this is the Pulpa chopped tomatoes can is here. So that's pretty cool. Now we have created kind of an app that goes to the internet and gets us data, and it makes for a nice thing to show at least our closest friends and so on. But let's keep working a little bit, and I'll show you a couple of other things here. Oh, and from the licorice point of view, I was supposed to show you this. So this is a finished licorice bar. So I don't know what your feelings about lakritsi are in general, but I happen to love it, and I'm going to eat this one after this presentation. So, but if we turn it around and we get the barcode, well now, yeah. So now we get the name of the licorice bar instead. So that's pretty cool. Okay. But then we might want to get some other information about the product as well. And we, like, I don't know, maybe we'll want to, no one wants to know this, but let's say we want to know how many calories there are in this product. So we'll do that, and we'll get into some kind of like manipulating text strings and that sort of stuff in that way. So again, we can take this other paragraph, and we can take the binding icon, and then again we want to bind to the data variable. But in this case we can, well, I'll first show you where to find the information for the let's see, it's in the nutriments category, I believe. Yes. So here we have energy kcal 100 grams thing. So we could use this, but of course now the limitation here is, I'll show you what the limitation is. Let's do this like we were actually developing this app. So that way it makes the most sense. So now we can see that the preview value tells us that in the schema that we have saved, this calories field had this entry 323, which by the way checks out. So the API is pretty accurate. So that's the value that we get. And then we can save this. And well, let's scan it again so we can see kind of like what the problem here is. So we're scanning the licorice bar and then we're getting the calories back. But now from a UI standpoint, like we know that this is the calories, but this is not really like the kind of UI that we would want to do. And the paragraph component, like if we just bind it here, it only allows us to do like this kind of, we can get a single value. But what we would like to do is maybe have it say something like calories per 100 grams. Like that would be a nice UI here. And then we could do lots of other things. So in order to get a bit more complex inputs going, we're going to again take the paragraph, but instead of directly binding to the data variable, we're actually going to be using something called a formula. So formulas are, if you've used like Google Sheets or Excel, you might have like heard about formulas. It's where like all the magic happens and you can make your mortgage calculations and that sort of thing work great. But if we open up the formula editor, it actually already knows which data that we were connected to. So it was this is kind of, I'll open up the formula and then I'll explain how this is put together. So what is happening here in the formula editor that we just opened is that it gives us the data variable that it was last bound to, which was the food fact variable. And here in the formulas, there's a little bit of this kind of script and code involved in that there's this namespace that contains all the data variables, which is called data. And then it's separated by a period from the name of the data variable, which is food fact. And then we can actually go deeper into the object returned by the so if I would take this back just slightly, so if I show you what's in the nutriments category, this is working poorly in my screen width, but here we can see in the preview like what properties would be available in the data under the nutriment product .nutriments kind of section of the data. So we could get all of these things out of here. And once again, these are pulled in the initial test of the API and the set schema. These are pulled from the API, but it makes it really easy to work with these. So what we would want to do is, hang on, what was that? It was energy 100 grams. Yes. Okay, I'll just back out and make it again. Yeah, okay, there we go. That's the correct value that we wanted. So now to do something with this value, we can use something called formula functions, which are here. So there's a bunch of formula functions that allow us to take when we want to do more finer manipulations of things in the application. So we can use formula functions and things here. So I'm just going to show you something. So we can, for example, use a capitalize function to capitalize strings. We can do different kinds of logic things. Here we can replace some words with other words. We can truncate, we can uppercase, And there's some math things available, like lots of different functions that enable us to do like lots of logic. And these are not, of course, only for displaying paragraph content, but these could be used in all the places where we bound values, pretty much all of them. You can also bind formulas. But in our case, it's enough that we just want to add a little text string in front of this value. So we'll go through we'll just go do this. We'll write the string calories per 100 grams and then do that and then add a space. And then the way to, in the formula editor, the way to kind of glue strings together is to add a plus sign between two strings. And we remember that this is going to be treated as a piece of text. So if I delete that, then it's going to give us a preview of the result. And then it's going to say calories per 100 grams is 323. And I think that would make it much more understandable. So this is the way you can do with formulas. You can do almost endless amounts of different manipulation. They can be used in lots of different places. And I could really like honestly spend like 1.5 hours talking to you about like what you can do with formulas. But this is just an example that how we can go a little bit deeper into these things. So once again, we save. All the things that I want to demo you here is basically just a little bit of like how to do some UI, how we can really quickly go into developing some logic out of just a simple button, and then connecting to external data resources like APIs and like in this case, for example, the Open Food Facts API, I just found it online. So there's no like, we haven't, AppGyver doesn't like, nothing has been done in advance to sort of like make it work better with this. So it's just a REST API online. And I found it like a couple of days ago and decided to build this example around it since I find scanning food products quite amusing myself. So I figured to use it as an example. I guess now would be a good time to take some questions, and if some of the questions, like I can also show things in Composer if you have something to ask, and I hope especially if you have something that you didn't understand about this presentation, I'm happy to kind of like talk a bit more about the things.
Yeah, there's been quite a few questions. I think just a lot of them about the platform in general. I'll try to see if there was one about this particular app. I think, can we postpone, someone asked a while back, can we postpone users' request in terms of request number limits of APIs, like showing a spinner or alert?
I'm not exactly sure what this refers to, but yes, you could like build sort of like that sort of logic by limiting things or like spinnering, and you could add I'm pretty sure you could, well, what I could do, for example, like let's imagine in this case, when you press the button, it opens the camera and therefore it hides the button. So there's no way to double click the button. But something that I could also do is that if this would just send a request, I could disable the button once the request is being sent. And then I could decide when if ever, I want to re-enable the button. So that would be a common logic to do. So I can show you, like, for example, how could well, the button has a disabled property, and you can bind the disabled property to anything. So that's something that I've done in some applications, and would be commonly done is that you would bind some logic to the disabled property. So if I disable it, then, yes, now there's no clicking. Well, you can't see me, but I'm clicking the button and it doesn't do anything right now because I disabled the button. So that's something you could do is controlling the UI of the thing. And you can of course build the logic also to kind of rate limit things and so on.
This one isn't a question, but I thought it was a good comment. There was this is a perfect feature enhancement example, introducing a search for the binding screen. I think when you were trying to look on the long list, and you had to scroll down quite a bit to find
I may or may not have submitted that ticket to our internal feature
Okay.
board already.
All right. Another one regarding field names. What happens if the field names changes when making the API call again?
In that case, if it's a sort of, okay, so I'll show you here, like by going into this thing. So that has already happened. Like this saved schema thing, it works really well when, and to be honest, like most APIs, like if you're a REST API, then you should have a reasonably stable schema, but of course not everyone does. So you can save the schema, and that helps. Of course, if it would now change, like let's pretend it has changed now. If I would redo the test now and then set the schema, then I get the new schema. So if you can kind of like manually refresh the schema as well. Like there's no automatic way to do that, but manually you can always refresh the schema. For example, if you're like building an API and then testing against it. Another thing you can do is simply specify a custom schema, and custom schema can even be like just like it can be like empty, in which case the API can return anything. Of course, then you don't have the benefit of the like knowing what the fields are, but again, if they keep changing, then you don't really know what the fields are, and there's very little you can do about that. But you can, like doing the test again and setting the schema from response, it will always refresh it from the source. So that it works that way just fine.
Somebody said that you should eat the licorice now.
I'm going to do it right after this presentation, but we're gonna skip on the licorice eating ASMR. So yeah.
Okay, so I think a lot of these are some more questions about the platform. I'll try to go back because there were some older ones that I may have missed. Somebody asked if you could add a small form showing that. I don't know how long that will take
sure.
you.
Well, I can do it while hopefully I can do it while I'm talking. So so yeah, actually I can show you how the some of the internal data resources work by making a new page here. Yeah, so let's get rid of the defaults, and then we do an input field. There's something you can type into, and then we'll do a button for submitting, just to make this kind of like extra clear, and then we'll save those. And then let's say we want to, I'll just save some data to the, like, we have this kind of AppGyver cloud storage, and it says here hobby use only, which just means that this is like best used for testing and kind of like prototyping and doing that sort of thing. So please don't please don't build your enterprise grade applications for millions of users on this. Or if you do it on your own responsibility.
There was actually a question about that, of how much data is can you store on the database?
Well, there's no limit as such, but like I guess if you start putting in very crazy things, then you might get a call from us or something. But but there is no limits as such. But also, just it's good to know that it's not sort of like, you know, there aren't those enterprise guarantees for that particular storage type that you would get from, for example, from AWS or something like that. So just keep that in mind. It's a perfectly fine database, and I think many people do run quite complicated applications on that and haven't had any problems. And we have no plans of like removing it, but if it's down for a minute on a Sunday, then like maybe understand that it's for hobby use only, that sort of thing. So yeah, here what I'm doing is I'm creating a cloud storage resource, and for the cloud storage resource, you only specify the schema of the data you want to store in it. So there's a built-in ID property for identifying the items, and now I created a name property, which is of the text type. And now we can I have to do one more thing, which is creating a variable, so we actually have some way to store this form data. So now I'm going to use the to-do resource to do a data variable, and for this I'm going to select new data record, since it's going to represent a new, and I'm just going to leave the auto-generated name to-do1 there. And I'm going to show you this. So this is an input field. Hang on, let's switch to this page so I can show you also how to add more pages to the navigation. So I added a new page, and we also want to have it in the menu so we can actually like navigate there. So okay, now we're there in the preview. And now some of the things that we need to do is, well, first of all, you can already type into this input. But the thing that we want to do here is bind the value to the new data variable, to the name property. So now we are entering a name. And this is, again, using the data variable here is a convenience, because then it gives us the fields of the data resource as given. You can do all of this with page variables by yourself if you really prefer to. And when I save it, it's going to switch back to the default, like the first default page of the navigation, which here is the first page that we worked on. But so with the submit here, so now we are able to, by binding this to the value property of the input, now the input value will always be, it will always set the input value to also be the data variable value. And now if we submit, we can just again use create a record, and then we can go into the custom object that we're passing, and then we can set this to the name. Yeah, so now if we go here, I'll be able to, let's test. Okay, can't see anything because but I'm submitting these in here, and then just to sort of see. So that's how you would approach doing a form. So you have the inputs, and then you bind them, and then you can send them to the API or different kinds of things. You can build quite, and there's checkbox fields and drop-down fields and all kinds of fields. And just to show you maybe one more important, interesting aspect of this thing, well, how do we do it if we want to see the things from the cloud storage resource? Well, for that, we create another data variable from the cloud storage resource now. So this is going to be like a to-do list. Yes, and that's going to be of the collection of data records type. And here we can see like where the default logic comes in handy. So if I look at the to-do list logic, then it's at the moment when I create the data variable, it already has this logic where it's fetching the records every 5 seconds from the database. So now if we do this, and then thing that I didn't show in the demo is this repeat with property. So now we can take this paragraph and we can repeat it with the data we are getting back from the cloud storage resource. So if we take this list, which is now just an automatic list that updates from the cloud storage data resource we just created, we can do this. And then with the value, we now get this new category that wasn't here before, which is called property of data item in repeat. And then it knows that we're repeating this, the same schema that we defined for the data resource. Sorry, I'm jumping through this quite quickly, but it makes for a kind of nice enough demo. So if we now go back here, sorry, that was under there. So now we can see that we can type in things here, and then they appear in the, because this input is now bound to the new data variable, and then this button is sending new records from this, using this form, to the cloud storage resource, and then the paragraph repeat here is taking all those items from the list, to-do list data variable, and we're binding to the name in that list, the current name, and then we get a list of all the records. Okay, that was a bit of a longer explanation, but I'm happy that I got that demo in.
Yeah, this is a 2-for-1 then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, quite a few more questions coming in. Let's see. I was also trying to answer some in the chat. Maybe you want to address custom JavaScript really quick. I don't know if that's something that can be touched upon quickly. I know we have a section for that in our documentation, but
yeah. Okay. So let's say we make another. Please don't make apps that look like this. I make a lot of apps that look like this when I'm testing things. But okay, here's another button. And the way it would work is, well, actually, I can just show this. I'm not going to show you like massive amounts of custom JavaScript, but here in the advanced section, we have this thing called JavaScript node, and then we could put it on the button. And then if we double click on this, we'll get this like editor here, and we can use the inputs from the logic chain, and we can set outputs, and this is kind of a broad topic to get into, so I won't start like doing lots of stuff here, but suffice to say that you can use custom JavaScript in these like logic nodes. Like that's what you can do is you can run your own things in between and kind of, for example, manipulate data. Like if you have some things that are like more complicated, or you want to do some custom logic, then you can insert these JavaScript boxes in your logic flows. So yeah, at least on my part, well, we've come at the end of our time and even 5 minutes past it. But for me, this was very fun. I hope you found this interesting and got some ideas. And I really hope that to see you on the forums and on the platform. So from my part, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much. And yeah, if you want to go ahead and share whatever you're building on social media, go ahead and tag us, and you can always get into contact with the team on the forums. And yeah, good luck building.